You know how sometimes one stupid joke can completely flip your entire world upside down? Well, I made a joke about moving in with someone if they were 45. And when she whispered back that she was 54, I realized my life was about to get a hole. Lot more complicated than I ever bargained for. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, age, and taking chances when you least expect them. I'm Daniel. I'm 35, and until 3 months ago I thought I had my life pretty well mapped out. I work as a freelance graphic designer for my cramped one-bedroom apartment in downtown Portland, Oregon. It's not exactly the creative empire I dreamed about in college. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But it pays the rent and gives me the freedom to work in my pajamas, which honestly might be the only perk keeping me sane these days. The thing about working from home is that it sounds amazing until you realize you've been talking to your houseplant more than actual humans for the past week. My social life basically consisted of video calls with clients who treat me like a vending machine for logos, and the occasional coffee run to the little cafe downstairs. It's just to remember what other people's voices sound like. I'm what you might call cautiously optimistic about life, or as my sister Emma puts it, chronically overthinking everything until the opportunity passes you by. She's probably right. I've always been the guy who reads all the reviews before buying a toothbrush, who makes pro and con lists for deciding what to have for lunch. Dating? Well, let's just say my last relationship ended 2 years ago when Sarah told me. I was emotionally unavailable, but in a really polite way, which I'm still trying to figure out whether that was a compliment or not. The apartment building I live in is one of those converted warehouse deals where the walls are thin enough that you know your neighbor's entire Netflix viewing history, but thick enough that you can pretend you don't hear them crying during romantic comedies. It's a mix of young professionals like me, few retirees who move downtown to stay connected to the energy, and the occasional artist who pays rent by selling paintings to tourists at the Saturday market. My daily routine was embarrassingly predictable. Wake up at 7:30, stumble to the kitchen to make coffee that's somehow always either too weak or strong enough to strip paint. Check emails while eating cereal from a bowl I probably should have washed yesterday, then settle into my desk chair that's slowly destroying my posture one project at a time. Lunch was usually whatever I could microwave while on a client call. And dinner was a rotation of the same 5 takeout places that knew my order by heart. It wasn't a bad life, exactly, but it wasn't particularly exciting either. I was comfortable, which my therapist, Dr. Martinez, says is both a blessing and a curse. Comfort zones are called that for a reason, Daniel. She'd remind me during our monthly check-ins. But nothing grows there. Easy for her to say. She didn't have student loans breathing down her neck, and a mother who called every Sunday to ask when I was going to settle down and give her grandchildren. The building had this weird community thing going on, organized by Mrs. Chen from the 3rd floor. She was one of those people who believed that apartment living didn't have to mean ignoring your neighbors. So she'd organized monthly potluck dinners in the building's community room. I'd managed to avoid them for the entire 2 years I'd lived there, always finding some urgent project deadline that coincidentally fell on potluck night. But Mrs. Chen was persistent. And eventually my guilt over avoiding a sweet elderly lady who just wanted to build community got the better of me. Plus, Emma had been on my case about getting out more, and I was running out of excuses that didn't make me sound like a complete hermit. That's how I ended up standing in the community room on a Thursday evening in late October, holding a store-bought vegetable tray and wondering if anyone would notice if I snuck back upstairs after exactly 15 minutes of polite small talk. The room was decorated with those sad, generic motivational posters you see in office break rooms. Someone had strung up string lights that probably came from last year's Christmas clearance sale. There were maybe 20 people scattered around, the usual mix of building residents I'd seen in the elevator but never actually spoken to. Mr. Peterson from 4B was holding court near the snack table, telling what sounded like the same fishing story he'd probably been perfecting for decades. The couple from 2A, I think their names were Jason and Maria, were attempting to wrangle their toddler who seemed determined to climb every piece of furniture in the room. I was scanning the room, calculating the minimum amount of time I needed to stay to avoid being rude, when I heard this laugh. Not the polite social gathering laugh that everyone was doing, but this genuine, unguarded sound that made me turn around without thinking. That's when I saw her. She was standing near the windows, talking to Mrs. Chen and gesturing with a wine glass in a way that suggested she was telling a story worth listening to. She had this presence that was hard to describe, confident without being showy, elegant in a way that seemed effortless. Her hair was a rich brown with streaks of silver that caught the light, and she was wearing a simple black sweater and jeans that somehow looked more put together than my best outfit. But it was her smile that got me. It was the kind of smile that made you want to know what was so funny. The kind that suggested she found genuine joy in whatever conversation she was having with Mrs. Chen about apartment building politics or grocery store prices or whatever. People talk about it, these things. I found myself moving closer, pretending to examine the dessert table while trying to catch fragments of their conversation. Something about a cooking disaster involving a smoke alarm in the fire department. She was laughing at herself, completely comfortable with being the punchline of her own story, and that's when fate, or maybe just my complete lack of social skills, decided to intervene. I was reaching for what I thought was a brownie when I knocked over the entire stack of paper plates, sending them cascading across the floor like the world's most pathetic confetti explosion. The sound was loud enough to stop every conversation in the room, and suddenly 20 pairs of eyes were watching me scramble around on my hands and knees, collecting plates and trying to disappear into the linoleum. "Here, let me help you with that," came a voice from above me, warm with just a hint of amusement. I looked up to see her crouching down, gathering plates with the kind of grace that made my flailing look even more ridiculous by comparison. Up close, I could see that her eyes were this incredible shade of green, the kind that reminded you of forests and deep water and all those poetic things you never think about until you're staring into them like an idiot. "Thanks," I managed, my voice coming out slightly higher than usual. I have a gift for making memorable first impressions. She laughed, that same genuine sound I'd heard from across the room. "Well, it's definitely memorable. I'm Sophia, by the way. I just moved into 3C last week." "Daniel," I said, standing up with my arms full of paper plates. "I live in 2D, and I promise I'm usually more coordinated than this." "Usually?" she teased, one eyebrow raised. "Okay, that might be a slight exaggeration," I admitted, which made her laugh again. Mrs. Chen appeared beside us, beaming like she'd orchestrated the entire plate incident herself. "Oh, wonderful, you two are meeting. Sophia, this is Daniel, our building's talented graphic designer." Sophia just retired from teaching high school English and moved here from Seattle. "Retired," I said before I could stop myself. She didn't look old enough to be retired. There was too much energy in the way she moved, too much spark in her eyes. Sophia smiled knowingly. I know. Everyone says I'm too young to retire. I taught for 30 years, started when I was 22, did the math. I was definitely doing the math, and it was making my brain short-circuit slightly. But before I could process the implications, Mrs. Chen was pulling us both toward the food table, chattering about Sophia's former career and how she'd decided to downsize and try city living after spending decades in the suburbs. "What made you choose Portland?" I asked as we filled our plates with the usual potluck suspects, 3 different versions of potato salad, some questionable casseroles, and cookies that ranged from homemade perfection to clearly store-bought. "Honestly, I threw a dart at a map," Sophia said with a grin. "Well, not literally, but close. After my divorce was finalized last year, I realized I'd been living someone else's life for so long that I had no idea what I actually wanted, so I decided to try something completely different." The way she said it was so matter-of-fact, like completely appending your entire existence was just another item on a to-do list. There was something both terrifying and inspiring about that kind of fearlessness. We found ourselves sitting together on one of the mismatched couches someone had dragged into the community room, balancing plates on our knees and falling into the kind of easy conversation that usually took me weeks to work up to. She told me about her teaching career, about the kids who'd driven her crazy and the ones who'd stolen her heart. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, about grading papers until 2 a.m. and still loving every minute of it. I found myself telling her about my work, about the clients who wanted something creative but not too creative, about the logo I'd designed for a local bakery that had become so popular they'd put it on t-shirts. She listened like she was genuinely interested, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. "So what's the plan now?" I asked. "Besides throwing darts at maps." "Well, I'm thinking about maybe writing a book," she said, then laughed at herself. Every retired teacher says that, right? But I've got all these stories from 30 years in the classroom, and I figure if I don't write them down now, I'll forget all the good ones. "That sounds amazing," I said, and I meant it. "What kind of book?" "Maybe something about all the ridiculous things that happen in high school that adults forget about. Like the time two kids got into a heated argument about whether hot dogs are sandwiches. And it somehow turned into a 3-day philosophical debate involving the entire sophomore class." I was laughing before she finished the story. "Hey, please tell." "Me, you settled the hot dog debate? Are you kidding?" I assigned them a 5-page essay on the topic. Best writing assignment I ever gave. As the evening wore on, other conversations happened around us. But I found myself completely absorbed in this woman who'd appeared in my building like some kind of gift I hadn't known I was waiting for. She was funny in ways that caught me off guard, intelligent without being condescending. And there was something about her presence that made me feel more like myself than I had in months. That's when my mouth decided to operate completely independently of my brain. "You know," I said, feeling brave and stupid in equal measure, "if you were 45, I'd probably ask if you wanted to move in together." The words hung in the air between us like a cartoon anvil about to drop. Immediately wanted to crawl under the couch and hide there until everyone forgot I existed. What kind of person makes a joke about moving in with someone they'd met literally 2 hours ago? What was wrong with me? But instead of looking horrified or calling building security, Sophia leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Ah!" 54, she whispered, her voice soft but clear enough that I could hear every word. "Does that change things?" My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I'm pretty sure I forgot how to breathe for a solid 10 seconds. She was 54, 19 years older than me. Almost 2 decades of life experience, of wisdom, of living in a world I was still figuring out, and somehow staring into those green eyes and seeing the challenge hidden in her smile. All I could think was that it didn't change anything at all. It changed everything. The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Around us, the potluck continued its predictable rhythm. Mr. Peterson was still telling his fishing story. The toddler had discovered the fascinating acoustics of banging a plastic cup against the radiator. And Mrs. Chen was bustling around, refilling drinks and making sure everyone felt included. But in our little bubble on the mismatched couch, now time had stopped completely. "Does that change things?" Sophia had asked, and I realized she was waiting for an answer. Not just any answer, the right answer. The honest answer. I started, then stopped. My usual instinct was to backtrack, to laugh it off, to turn it into a bigger joke that would let us both off the hook. But something about the way she was looking at me, patient and curious, and maybe just a little vulnerable, made me want to tell the truth. "No," I said finally, "it doesn't change things. It just makes them more interesting." The smile that spread across her face was like watching the sunrise. Slow, warm, and absolutely radiant. "Good answer," she said, and I felt like I'd passed some kind of test I didn't even know I was taking. From that moment, the conversation shifted into something deeper. We weren't just making polite small talk anymore, we were actually getting to know each other. Sophia told me about her marriage, how it had slowly dissolved over the years, as she and her ex-husband grew into different people who wanted different things. "We weren't unhappy, exactly," she explained, absently playing with the stem of her wine glass. "We were just ... parallel, like 2 trains running on tracks that never quite met." After our daughter went to college, we realized we'd been staying together more out of habit than love. That sounds lonely, I said, and she nodded. It was. But you know what's funny? I feel less lonely now, living by myself in a strange city, than I did sharing a house with someone for the last 5 years of our marriage. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. My own isolation was self-imposed, but isolation nonetheless. What about you? She asked. The mysterious graphic designer from 2D. What's your story? So I told her. About growing up as the practical middle child in a family of dreamers. About studying business before switching to art and disappointing my parents who'd envisioned me in a suit and tie. About Sarah, my ex-girlfriend, who'd been right about my emotional availability issues. Though I was only now starting to understand what she'd meant. I think I've been waiting for permission, I admitted. Permission to take risks, to fail spectacularly, to want things that don't make sense on paper. And who exactly is supposed to give you that permission? Sophia asked with a raised eyebrow. I have no idea. That's probably the problem, she laughed. Not at me, but with me, like she understood. Exactly what I meant. You know what I learned after 30 years of teenagers? Sometimes you just have to give yourself permission. Nobody else is going to do it for you. As the evening wound down, people started gathering their empty dishes and saying their goodbyes. Mrs. Chen was in full hostess mode, making sure everyone had exchanged contact information and promising to organize another gathering soon. I found myself reluctant to let the night end, not ready to go back to my apartment and pretend this conversation had been just another polite neighbor interaction. Walk me to my door? Sophia asked as we made our way out of the community room. And I nodded, maybe a little too eagerly. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor was quiet, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of comfortable silence that felt full of possibilities rather than empty of words. When we reached her door, she turned to face me, keys in hand. This was nice, she said. Unexpected, but nice. Very unexpected, I agreed. I wasn't exactly planning to any of this when I came downstairs tonight. It's funny that way, she said. The good stuff usually happens when you're not looking for it. She hesitated for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. Would you like to have coffee sometime? I mean real coffee, not the dishwater they serve at building meetings. I'd love that, I said. Probably too quickly. I know a place. A date, she said, then paused, seeming to realize what she'd just said. I mean, it's well, whatever you want to call it. A date sounds perfect, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. She smiled, the same radiant expression that it had. Knocked me sideways all evening. Good, because I haven't been on a proper date in about 3 years, and I'm terrified I've forgotten how. Well, I haven't been on a proper date in 2 years, so we can figure it out together. She unlocked her door but didn't go inside right away. Instead, she stood there looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part amusement, part curiosity, part something that might have been hope. Daniel, she said softly, can I ask you something? Of course, when you made that joke about moving in together, ... Were you actually joking? The question caught me completely off guard. I opened my mouth to give some safe, non-committal answer, but what came out instead was the truth. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I was testing the waters without realizing it. Maybe I was saying something I didn't have the courage to say seriously. She nodded slowly, like she was processing this information. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. Really? Because I feel like I'm about to have a panic attack? She laughed, reaching out to touch my arm briefly. That's how you know it matters. After she disappeared behind her door, I stood in the hallway for a full minute, trying to process what had just happened. I'd come to a potluck dinner expecting to make polite conversation about the weather and building maintenance issues. Instead, I'd met someone who made me want to be the kind of person who took chances, who said what he meant, who didn't spend his life waiting for permission to live. The elevator ride back to the 2nd floor felt like descending from some alternate universe where I was confident and charming and capable of talking to beautiful women without making a complete fool of myself. By the time I reached my apartment, reality was starting to set in. Sophia was 54. I was 35. She was recently divorced, starting a new chapter of her life. I was. I was still trying to figure out what my first chapter was supposed to look like. But as I got ready for bed that night, I kept thinking about what she'd said about giving yourself permission. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for someone else to tell me it was okay to want something or someone. It didn't fit into my carefully constructed comfort zone. Maybe. It was time to find out what would happen if I actually meant what I'd said about moving in together. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, for the first time in years, I fell asleep smiling. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of nervous energy that made me clean my entire apartment before 9 a.m. and reorganize my desk 3 times. I kept replaying the conversation with Sophia, wondering if I'd imagined the spark between us or if it had been as real as it felt. That's when my phone rang. "Emma?" So my sister said without preamble, "Mom told me you finally went to one of those building things. Did you actually talk to another human being, or did you just eat free food and hide in the corner?" Emma was 2 years younger than me, but had somehow appointed herself my social life manager. She was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, fearless, the kind of person who struck up conversations with strangers in grocery store lines and somehow ended up invited to their birthday parties. "I talk to people," I said, trying to sound casual while making my 4th cup of coffee. People, plural. "Look at you, Mr. Social Butterfly. Anyone interesting?" I hesitated. Emma had a talent for turning any piece of information into a full-scale interrogation. And I wasn't sure I was ready to explain the Sophia situation to someone who would definitely have opinions about it. "There was this woman," I said finally. "Sophia, she just moved into the building." "Ooh, a woman. Tell me everything. Is she cute, single age appropriate? Please tell me she's not another one of those 20-something yoga instructors you always seem to attract." "She's different," I said, which was both completely true and thoroughly inadequate. "Different how? Come on, Daniel. Work with me here. I haven't had good gossip in weeks." Before I could figure out how to explain that the woman I was interested in was old enough to have been my high school teacher, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Marcus, my neighbor from across the hall, holding what appeared to be a toolkit. "Hold on him," I said, opening the door. Marcus was one of those guys who seemed to know everyone in the building and had an opinion about everything. He worked as a personal trainer at one of those expensive downtown gyms, and had the kind of confidence that came from people paying him to tell them what to do. "Hey man," Marcus said, stepping into my apartment without waiting for an invitation. "Mrs. Chen asked me to check on some loose floorboards in the community room. You were there last night, right? With the new chick from 3C? I could hear Emma making interested noises through the phone. "Is that about Sophia?" she called out loudly. "Enough for Marcus to hear?" Marcus grinned. "Sophia, that's her name?" "Dude, she is smoking hot. Very sophisticated, very ... mature. You move fast, my friend. It's not like that," I started, but Marcus was already settling onto my couch like he was planning to stay a while. "Look, I get it," he said, completely ignoring my protests. "Older. Women know what they want. They don't play games. They appreciate a guy who's got his life together. It's like dating on expert mode." Emma was practically shouting through the phone now. "Put me on speaker. I want to hear this. Against my better judgment, I did." Emma's voice filled the room with all the subtlety of a marching band. "Hi, I'm Emma, Daniel's sister and self-appointed love life consultant. How much older are we talking here?" Marcus looked at me with raised eyebrows. "I don't know, maybe late 40s, early 50s. Hard to tell with some women." The silence from Emma's end was deafening. Then, "Daniel, are you dating someone who could be your mother?" "I'm not dating anyone," I protested. "We just talked at a potluck dinner." "But you want to date her?" Marcus said, with the confidence of someone who thought he had everything figured out. "Trust me, I know the signs. You've got that look." "What look?" "That I'm about to do something that will either be amazing or completely destroy my life look. I've seen it before." Emma chimed in from the phone. "Okay, I need details. What exactly happened at this potluck?" So I told them. About the plate incident, about the conversation, about the joke that wasn't really a joke. By the time I finished, Marcus was nodding like everything made perfect sense, while Emma had gone suspiciously quiet. "Well," Marcus said finally, "you definitely went for it." I respect that. Most guys your age would be intimidated by a woman with that much life experience. Are you insane? Emma's voice crackled through the phone. Daniel, you cannot seriously be considering this. What do you two possibly have in common? What are you going to talk about? Your mortgage payments and your student loans? It's not about age, I said, surprised by how defensive I sounded. She's interesting. She's funny. She makes me feel like I can actually have a conversation without overthinking every word. Marcus nodded approvingly. See? Chemistry doesn't care about age. Some of my clients have been with guys 20 years older than them. It's about connection. That's completely different, Emma shot back. Those are gold diggers. I don't even know what this is. It's two adults who enjoyed each other's company, I said firmly. That's all. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I felt when I talked to Sophia was more than just enjoying her company. It was the feeling that I'd been sleepwalking through my life and had suddenly woken up. Marcus stood up, toolkit in hand. Look, man, here's my advice. Don't overthink it. If you like her and she likes you, see where it goes. Life's too short to worry about what other people think. And my advice, Emma said pointedly, is to think very carefully about what you're getting yourself into. Age gaps like that come with complications you can't even imagine yet. After Marcus left and I hung up with Emma, I sat in my apartment feeling more confused than before. Part of me knew Emma had a point. There were probably complications I hadn't considered, practical issues that would arise if this thing with Sophia became something real. But another part of me, it's a part that had been dormant for too long, was tired of being practical. Tired of making safe choices and living a safe life. Tired of letting fear make my decisions for me, I looked at my phone, thinking about texting Sophia about that coffee date we'd mentioned. Then I set it down, picked it up again, and set it down once more. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I was overthinking it, or maybe Emma was right. I was about to make the kind of mistake that would teach me exactly why some risks weren't worth taking. Either way, I was pretty sure I was going to find out. I finally worked up the courage to text Sophia 2 days later. Not because I was feeling particularly brave, but because I'd caught myself staring at her contact information so many times that I was starting to worry about my mental health. Coffee tomorrow? I know a place that doesn't serve dishwater. Daniel, her response came back within minutes. I'd love to. Fair warning, though. I'm one of those people who judges coffee shops by their pastry selection. No pressure. The fact that she used an emoji somehow made me ridiculously happy. I chose Grind Coffee, a little place about 6 blocks from our building, that made their own croissants and had the kind of atmosphere that encouraged long conversations. I got there 15 minutes early because punctuality was one of my few reliable traits. I spent the time rearranging the sugar packets and wondering if I was making a massive mistake. Sophia arrived exactly on time. She was looking effortlessly put together, in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that made her eyes look even greener. She smiled when she saw me, that same warm expression that had been replaying in my head for the past 48 hours. So she said, sliding into the seat across from me, "Tell me about these famous pastries." We ordered coffee and split a chocolate croissant that was probably worth the price of admission by itself. The conversation started light. She told me about her attempts to navigate Portland's public transportation system. I told her about my ongoing war with the ancient printer in my apartment that only worked when it felt like it, but gradually. The way these things do when you're talking to someone who actually listens. It got deeper. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said, stirring her latte with a kind of precision that suggested she was thinking carefully about her words. "Of course." "It's other night when you made that joke about moving in together? What were you really saying?" I felt that familiar flutter of panic, the instinct to deflect or make another joke to lighten the mood. But something about the way she was looking at me, curious, not judgmental, made me want to try honesty instead. I think I said slowly, I was saying that I'm tired of being careful all the time. Tired of making decisions based on what makes sense instead of what feels right. She nodded like this made perfect sense to her. Married my college boyfriend because he was stable and reliable. Stayed in a job I was good at even when it stopped challenging me. Lived in the same house for 20 years because moving seemed too complicated. And now I'm 54 years old, living in a city where I don't know anyone, having coffee with a man 19 years younger than me who makes me laugh. She paused, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It's terrifying and exhilarating, and I have no idea what I'm doing. That makes two of us, I said. I've been playing it safe for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to take a real risk. What would a real risk look like? She asked. The question hung between us, loaded with possibilities I wasn't sure I was ready to examine. But something. About the quiet intimacy of the coffee shop, the way the afternoon light was catching in her hair, made me feel braver than usual. Honestly, it would look like admitting that I haven't stopped thinking about you since Thursday night. That I've been checking my phone every 5 minutes hoping you'd text me. That when I said I'd ask you to move in if you were 45, part of me wasn't joking at all. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look away. And the fact that I'm 54 instead of 45 makes it scarier, I admitted. And somehow more real. She was quiet for a long moment, turning her coffee cup in slow circles on the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. Daniel, I need to tell you something. I'm not just divorced. I'm scared. Scared that I waited too long to figure out who I am outside of being someone's wife and someone's mother. Scared that I'm too set in my ways to start over. Scared that she trailed off, shaking her head. Scared that what? I asked gently. Scared that I might fall for someone who could have any young, uncomplicated woman he wants, and I'll just be a phase he goes through before he finds someone more appropriate. The vulnerability in her voice hit me like a physical weight. This confident, elegant woman who seemed to have everything figured out was sitting across from me admitting fears that mirrored my own. Sophia, I said, reaching across the table. To touch her hand, I've been on dates with young, uncomplicated women. They bored me to tears. Make me want to be interesting enough to keep up with you. She looked down at our joined hands, then back up at me. This is crazy, isn't it? We barely know each other. Completely crazy, I agreed. But maybe crazy is exactly what I need right now. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it's a disaster? Then we'll have learned something about ourselves, I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. But what if it does work? What if we're sitting here worrying about all the wrong things? She laughed, the sound mixing relief and nervousness in equal measure. You know what the worst part is? I actually like you. Not just find you attractive or interesting. I actually like spending time with you. That hasn't happened in a very long time. Same here, I said. Which is why I think we should stop overthinking this and see what happens. You mean like actually dating? Not just coffee and conversations about our fears? I mean like dinner dates and movies and meeting each other's friends and all the terrifying normal relationship stuff that people do when they like each other. She squeezed my hand. Okay, but I have one condition. What's that? No more jokes. About moving in together until we've been on at least 5 real dates. I grinned. Deal. But after 5 dates, all bets are off. After 5 dates, she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief, we'll see who's brave enough to bring it up first. Over the next 3 weeks, Sophia and I fell into a pattern that felt both natural and revolutionary. Coffee dates became dinner dates. Dinner dates became long walks through Portland's neighborhoods, discovering bookstores and vintage shops and little restaurants that served the kind of food that made you want to linger over conversation. She was right about judging coffee. Shops by their pastries, we'd tried 7 different places, and she had strong opinions about each one. The place with the amazing scones, but terrible lighting. The one with perfect espresso, but pastries that tasted like cardboard. Her running commentary was funnier than any comedy show I'd ever watched. You realize you're developing a reputation? I told her as we left our latest coffee expedition. Mrs. Chen asked me if you were a food critic. Mrs. Chen talks to you about me? Sophia asked, looking pleased. Mrs. Chen talks to everyone about everything. But yes, she seems to approve of us. She keeps asking when you're coming to the next potluck. Hey, are we in US now? She asked, and there was something in her voice that made me stop walking. We were standing on the sidewalk outside a used bookstore. evening light filtering through the trees and casting everything in that golden glow that makes ordinary moments feel significant. She was looking at me with that expression I was learning to recognize, part curiosity, part vulnerability, part challenge. "I'd like to be," I said, "if you want to be." "I want to be," she said, then laughed at herself. God, I sound like I'm in high school. I haven't had to figure out relationship definitions in decades. Well, I haven't had to figure them out with someone who actually knows what she wants, I said. It's refreshing and terrifying. We'd been taking things slowly, which was partly my natural caution, and partly because neither of us seemed to know exactly how to navigate this thing we were building, but slowly was working. Each date revealed new layers, new things to discover about each other. Like the fact that Sophia sang along to the radio when she thought no one was listening, but only 2 songs from the 80s, or that she had strong opinions about grocery store layouts and could navigate any supermarket like she'd designed it herself, or that she collected vintage postcards from places she'd never been, keeping them in a shoebox that she'd brought with her from Seattle. "It's silly," she'd said, showing me the collection one evening in her apartment, "but I like the idea of all these places I might visit someday. Where do you want to go first?" I'd asked, flipping through postcards from Paris, Tokyo, New Zealand. Honestly, I've never been to New York. 30 years of living on the West Coast, and I've never seen the Statue of Liberty in person. I made a mental note to look up flights to New York, not because we were at the point of planning trips together, but because the idea of seeing the city through her eyes made me want to book tickets immediately. My work was getting better too, though I wasn't sure if it was because I was happier or because Sophia had started giving me feedback on my designs. She had an eye for detail that came from years of grading student papers, and she wasn't afraid to tell me when something wasn't working. This logo was trying too hard, she'd said about a design I'd been struggling with for weeks. What if you simplified it? Made it more confident? She was right, of course. The final version was cleaner, stronger, exactly what the client had been looking for, but couldn't articulate. "You should charge extra for art direction," she'd teased. "Hire you as a consultant. I don't know anything about graphic design. You know about communication? Half of my job is figuring out what people really want to say." The only shadow over our developing routine was the growing awareness that other people had opinions about us. Emma had been calling more frequently, her concern disguised as casual check-ins. Marcus made comments that were supportive but tinged with that "good for you" man energy that suggested he thought I was living out some kind of fantasy. And then there were the looks we got when we were out together, nothing overt but the kind of quick glances that people thought we wouldn't notice, the assumption that we were mother and son, followed by the slight confusion when they realized we were holding hands. "Does it bother you?" Sophia asked one evening, after a particularly awkward encounter with a server who couldn't figure out how to address us. "Tell which part, the way people look at us, the assumptions they make." I thought about it sometimes. Not because I'm embarrassed, but because I hate that they're making you uncomfortable. "I'm not uncomfortable," she said, just ... aware. I spent so many years being invisible, being just someone's wife or someone's mother. Now I'm suddenly very visible again, but for reasons I'm not used to. Good visible or bad visible? Different visible, she said. Like I'm breaking rules I didn't even know existed. Are you okay with breaking rules? She smiled, that mischievous. The expression that had first caught my attention? You know what? I think I am. After 30 years of following every rule, being the good wife and the responsible teacher and the perfect mother, I think I'm ready to be a little rebellious. How rebellious are we talking? Rebellious enough to have dinner at my place tomorrow. Night I'll cook. You can help, assuming you know your way around a kitchen. I make excellent scrambled eggs and mediocre pasta. Perfect. I'll handle the complicated stuff. As we walked back to our building that night, I realized we'd passed some invisible milestone. We weren't just dating anymore. We were building something together, creating routines, making plans, starting to think in terms of we instead of I. It should have been scary. 6 months ago, the idea of being this invested in someone would have sent me running in the opposite direction. Instead, all I could think about was tomorrow night's dinner and the growing certainty that I was exactly where I wanted to be. The dinner at Sophia's place was supposed to be simple, pasta, wine, conversation. What I didn't expect was to walk into her apartment and find it completely transformed from the sparse, temporary space I'd imagined into something that felt like home. She'd hung artwork on the walls, real pieces that looked like they meant something to her. The kitchen smelled like garlic and herbs, and there was jazz playing softly from a speaker I couldn't see. She was wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look younger and more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. "This is amazing," I said, looking around. "It doesn't even look like the same apartment Mrs. Chen showed me when I was looking at units." "That's what happens when you actually unpack," she said with a laugh. "I spent the first 2 weeks living out of boxes like I was still deciding whether to stay. And now I'm unpacked," she said, handing me a glass of wine. "Which either means I'm committed to Portland or I'm really good at procrastinating the big decisions." We cooked together, which should have been awkward given that her kitchen was barely big enough for one person. Tess somehow wasn't. She moved around the space with efficiency, chopping vegetables and stirring sauce while I handled the pasta and tried not to get in her way. It felt domestic in a way that was both comfortable and startling. "So," she said as we sat down to eat, "tell me about your family. I know you have a sister who thinks I'm too old for you, but what about your parents?" I groaned. "Emma told you that. She didn't have to. I can hear it in your voice when you mention her. She's worried about you. Emma thinks anyone over 30 is ancient. Your parents are ... complicated. Dad's a contractor, Mom works for the city planning office. They're good people, but they have very specific ideas about how life should go. Graduate college, get a steady job, marry someone appropriate, buy a house, have kids, in that order. And you're failing at most of those milestones? All of them, actually. Freelance work doesn't count as a steady job in their minds. I rent instead of own. And my last girlfriend dumped me because I couldn't commit to getting a dog together, let alone marriage." Sophia laughed. "A dog? That's a commitment issue, apparently." Sarah said, "I treated the relationship like a trial run instead of the real thing." She wasn't wrong. "What's different now?" she asked, and the question hung in the air with more weight than I was prepared for. Before I could answer, my phone started ringing. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "I should probably take this," I said apologetically. "She'll keep calling until I do. Daniel." Emma's voice was bright with forced cheerfulness. "How are you? What are you up to tonight?" "I'm having dinner with Sophia," I said, looking across the table at her. She was twirling pasta around her fork with the kind of focus that suggested she was trying not to listen. "Oh, right. The ... situation." "It's not a situation, Em. It's a relationship." Okay. Listen, I was talking to Mom today, and she mentioned that cousin Lisa is getting married next month to someone she met on that app. You know, the normal way people meet now. I could see where this was going. Emma ... I'm just saying there are plenty of women your age out there, women who want the same things you want, women who aren't already. She paused, clearly searching for the right words. "Aren't already what?" "Finished with all the stuff you haven't even started yet. Kids, career changes, figuring out who you are. Don't you want to go through that stuff with someone?" The implication stung more than I expected. That Sophia was somehow done with life, while I was still figuring mine out, that we were at fundamentally incompatible stages. "I'll call you later," I said, hanging up before Emma could say anything else. "Everything okay?" Sophia asked, though her expression suggested she'd heard enough to get the gist. "Family drama? They mean well, but ... But they think you're making a mistake." I wanted to deny it, but the truth was written all over my face. "They think we're at different stages of life, that you've already done all the things I'm supposed to be doing." Sophia set down her fork, her expression carefully neutral. "And what do you think?" "I think they're scared because this doesn't fit into their timeline for my life. But their timeline was never really mine anyway." "Daniel," she said gently, "they're not wrong about us being at different stages. I have a daughter. In college, I've been married and divorced. I've had a career and retired from it. You're still figuring out what you want to do with your life. So you think this is a mistake too? I think it's complicated. I think your family loves you and wants to protect you from complications." Conversation was taking a turn I wasn't prepared for. What had started as a cozy dinner was becoming something that felt like a relationship evaluation. "Are you having second thoughts?" I asked. She was quiet for a long moment, looking down at her wine glass. "Sometimes it's not about you, but about what this means for both of us. You should be with someone who's excited about building a life together, not someone who's already built one and is trying to figure out what comes next. What if what comes next includes me? What if it doesn't? What if we try this and you realize you want things I can't give you? What if you want kids someday? If you want to travel the world and I'm too tired?
And what if?
What if we stop borrowing trouble and focus on right now?" I interrupted. "What if we figure it out as we go instead of assuming it's doomed before we even try?" She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "You make it sound so simple." Maybe. It is simple. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. God. But even as I said it, I could feel the weight of all the external pressures settling around us like fog. Emma's concerns, my parents' expectations, the looks from strangers who couldn't figure out what we were to each other. The growing awareness that what felt natural and right between us might not look that way to the rest of the world. "Maybe we should take a step back," Sophia said quietly. "Think about whether we're being fair to each other." The words hit me. Like cold water. Is that what you want? I want to be sure we're not just caught up in the novelty of this. That we're not making decisions based on rebellion instead of genuine feeling. I reached across the table for her hand. "The way I feel about you isn't rebellion, Sophia. It's the most real thing I've felt in years." She squeezed my fingers. "I know. That's what makes this so hard." The step back lasted exactly 3 days, before we both realized we were miserable. Sophia texted me first. "This is ridiculous. Coffee at Grind in an hour? I was there in 30 minutes. So," she said, sliding into our usual booth, "how's the rational thinking going?" Terrible. I've reorganized my entire apartment twice and started 3 different client projects just to distract myself from missing you. I've been drafting a resignation letter from dating, she said with a wry smile, but I kept deleting it. Maybe we should stop trying to think our way out of this and just see what happens. Maybe, she agreed. But we should probably talk about the elephant in the room first. Which elephant? There seemed to be several. She laughed, but her expression was serious. In the fact that I haven't told my daughter about you yet, that stopped me cold. In all our conversations about family and external pressures, I'd somehow forgotten that Sophia had a daughter in college, someone who was probably closer to my age than to her mother's age. "Tell me about her," I said. "Chloe? She's 22, a senior at University of Washington studying environmental science. She's brilliant and passionate and has absolutely no patience for what she considers adult nonsense." Sophia paused, stirring her coffee. "She's also very protective of me since the divorce. What does she know about your new life in Portland? That I'm here, that I'm writing, that I seem happier than I've been in years? What she doesn't know is why I'm happier." I could see the conflict in her eyes. "You're afraid she won't approve." "I'm afraid she'll think I'm having some kind of midlife crisis." Chloe has very strong opinions about appropriate behavior. When I started dating again after the divorce, she made it clear she thought I should be focusing on myself, not looking for another relationship. And now you're dating someone her age. I'm dating someone who makes me feel like myself again. But yes, someone who happens to be her age. She looked up at me. "How do you think that conversation goes?" "Hi, honey. I'm dating a man who graduated high school the same year you were born." The mathematics of it, laid out like that, were stark. But sitting across from Sophia, seeing the genuine worry in her eyes, all I could think about was how wrong it felt to reduce what we had to numbers. "When are you planning to tell her?" "She's coming to visit next weekend." I thought, maybe you could meet her? Not as my boyfriend, just as my friend who happens to live in the building. The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure. "And then what?" "Then we see how she reacts to you as a person before we complicate things with labels." It sounded reasonable, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. "Sophia, are you ashamed?" "Of us?" "No," she said quickly, then paused. "Maybe not ashamed exactly, but aware of how it looks. Aware that people are going to make assumptions about why we're together." "What kind of assumptions?" "That you're looking for a mother figure. that I'm trying to recapture my youth, but it's not real, just some kind of psychological compensation for what we're both lacking. Her honesty hit me like a physical blow. These were fears she'd been carrying alone. I realized I'd been so focused on external pressures that I hadn't considered how they might be affecting her internally. "Is that what you think this is?" I asked. "Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. I wonder if I'm just flattered that someone young and attractive is interested in me. If you're just drawn to someone who seems to have her life figured out. And what conclusion do you come to? That it doesn't matter what this started as, what matters is what it's becoming." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression changed. "What is it?" "Text from my ex-husband. Richard. She showed me the screen. Heard you're dating someone. Hope you're being smart about it." "How did he hear?" "About us? Probably from Chloe. She still talks to her father regularly." Sophia's jaw tightened. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Now it's going to become a family discussion about my choices. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's time for your family to know that you're building a new life that makes you happy. Or maybe it's time for me to realize that some choices come with consequences I'm not prepared for. The doubt in her voice was like watching clouds roll in before a storm. I could see her retreating, pulling back into the careful, measured person she'd been before we started taking risks together. "Sophia, look at me." She met my eyes reluctantly. "Whatever your ex-husband thinks, whatever your daughter thinks, whatever my sister thinks, none of that changes how I feel about you. None of that changes the fact that you make me want to be braver than I've ever been. What if being brave isn't enough? What if we're setting ourselves up for heartbreak, and we'll deal with it when it happens? But walking away now because we're scared of what might go wrong? That's not protecting ourselves. That's just giving up." She was quiet. For a long moment, watching people walk by outside the coffee shop window. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm 54 years old, Daniel. I should be mature enough not to care what other people think. Caring what people think doesn't make you immature. It makes you human. I don't want to lose my daughter over this. She's the most important thing in my life. She doesn't have to be the only important thing in your life." Sophia looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe it's time to find out if the people who love you can accept that you deserve to be happy, even if your happiness doesn't look the way they expected. And if they can't, then we'll figure out what comes next." Together, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You really believe that, don't you? That we can figure this out?" "I believe that what we have is worth fighting for. The question is whether you believe it too." Chloe arrived on a Friday afternoon. I could hear her voice through the thin walls of our building before I even saw her. She had the kind of laugh that filled spaces confident, unguarded. Exactly what I'd expect from Sophia's daughter. I was working at my desk when Sophia texted, "She's here. Wish me luck." The plan was simple. I'd run into them accidentally. At the coffee shop downstairs, we'd have a brief, friendly conversation, and Chloe would meet me as just another neighbor. No pressure, no expectations, just a casual introduction that might pave the way for more honesty later. What actually happened was that I spent 20 minutes pacing my apartment, changed my shirt twice, and nearly chickened out completely. When I finally made it to the coffee shop, they were already there. Sophia was easy to spot, but seeing her next to Chloe was jarring in a way I hadn't expected. They looked so much alike, the same green eyes, the same animated way of talking with their hands. But more than that, they looked like contemporaries. Two women who could easily be mistaken for friends rather than mother and daughter. Chloe was beautiful in that effortless way that 22-year-olds are. All long limbs and clear skin, and the kind of confidence that comes from not yet learning. There are things to be afraid of. She was wearing vintage jeans and a flannel shirt that probably cost more than my monthly coffee budget. And she was gesturing enthusiastically while telling some story that had Sophia laughing. I ordered my usual and was about to retreat to a corner table when Sophia spotted me. "Daniel." "What a coincidence," she said, her voice just slightly too bright. "Chloe, this is my neighbor Daniel. Daniel, this is my daughter Chloe." Chloe looked up at me with frank curiosity, the way people do when they're trying to place you in context. Oh, you're the graphic designer Mom mentioned. The one who helped her figure out the building's recycling system. I had definitely not helped with any recycling system, but I played along. That's me. How are you liking Portland? It's cool. Very granola Y, but in a good way. Mom seems to love it here. She's fitting right in, I said, trying to sound like a casual neighbor making small talk. Are you from here originally? Chloe asked. Chicago, actually. Moved here about 3 years ago for work. What kind of graphic design do you do? Before I could answer, Sophia jumped in. Daniel does. Logos and branding for local businesses. He's very talented. There was something in her tone that made Chloe glance between us with sharpened interest. I realized we were failing miserably at the Casual Neighbors Act. Well, I said, sensing it was time to make an exit, I should let you two get back. Two catching up. Nice meeting you, Chloe. Yeah, you too, she said, but her eyes were still calculating. As I walked away, I heard her say to Sophia, He seems nice. How well do you know him? I didn't hear Sophia's response, but I saw her posture. Chained shoulders slightly tense, smile just a little too fixed. Later that evening, Sophia texted, We need to talk. Tomorrow. The next morning, she showed up at my door, looking like she hadn't slept much. How did it go after I left? I asked. About as well as you'd expect. Chloe has excellent instincts. She knows something's going on. What did you tell her? Nothing. But she's asking questions I'm not ready to answer. Sophia sat down heavily on my couch. She wants to meet you again. Properly this time, she suggested. The three of us have dinner tonight. My stomach dropped. What did you say? I said I'd ask if you were free. She looked at me with an expression. That was part apology, part plea. I know this isn't what we planned, but I think she's going to figure it out anyway. Maybe it's better if we control the narrative. You mean tell her the truth? I mean let her get to know you as a person first. Then tell her the truth. The idea of spending an evening under Chloe's scrutiny while pretending to be just Sophia's friend felt like walking through a minefield. But looking at Sophia's worried face, I realized this wasn't really about me at all. Okay, I said. Do dinner. The dinner was a disaster from the moment we sat down. I'd suggested a neutral restaurant, somewhere casual where the conversation could flow naturally. What I hadn't counted on was Chloe's ability to turn any interaction into an interrogation, disguised as friendly curiosity. So, Daniel, she said, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision, Mom mentioned you're freelance. I must be really uncertain, financially speaking. Sophia warned quietly, but her daughter was just getting started. I'm just curious about the gig economy. My generation is supposedly all about that lifestyle, but I wonder if it gets harder to maintain as you get older. Like, don't you want more stability eventually? I could feel Sophia tense beside me. It has its challenges, I said carefully, but I like the flexibility. Flexibility is great when you're young, Chloe continued, her tone conversational, but her eyes sharp. But what about things like health insurance, retirement planning, buying a house, starting a family? Each question felt like a small knife, carefully aimed at everything Sophia and I hadn't talked about. The practical realities that didn't matter when we were lost in conversation over coffee, but loomed large when examined under fluorescent restaurant lighting. I think Daniel's doing just fine managing his career, Sophia said, her voice strained. I'm sure he is. I'm just making conversation. Chloe smiled sweetly. It's interesting how different people approach life planning. Like Mom, you were so careful about everything when I was growing up. Every decision was researched and planned and discussed. It's kind of refreshing to see you being more spontaneous. Now, the word spontaneous landed like a grenade. Sophia's face went pale, and I realized Chloe knew exactly what she was doing. Chloe, Sophia said sharply, what exactly are you trying to say? Nothing. I think it's great that you're making new friends. Really expanding your social circle. Chloe turned back to me. How long have you two known each other? About 6 weeks, I said, and immediately regretted my honesty. 6 weeks, Chloe repeated slowly. You're already having dinner together? That's fast for Mom. She usually takes months to warm up to new people. The conversation was spiraling, and I could see Sophia retreating further into herself with each pointed comment. Finally, she set down her fork with more force than necessary. Okay, Chloe, that's enough. What's this really about? This is about you acting completely out of character and me wondering why. Chloe's composure finally cracked slightly. Dad said you're dating someone. And when I meet this mysterious neighbor who happens to be closer to my age than yours, I'm supposed to pretend I don't notice? The silence that followed was deafening. Other diners continued their conversations around us, but at our table, everything had stopped. How old are you, Daniel? Chloe asked quietly. 35, I said. 35, she repeated. Mom, you're 54. That's a 19-year age gap. He's only 13 years older than me. I'm aware of the math, Chloe. Are you? Because this looks like a textbook midlife crisis. Recently divorced woman moves to new city, immediately starts dating someone completely inappropriate. That's enough. Sophia's voice was ice cold. Daniel is not inappropriate, and my personal life is not up for your approval. Your personal life affects me too, Chloe shot back. What happens when this doesn't work out? When he realizes he wants someone his own age who can give him kids and a normal relationship? What happens when you're left heartbroken, and I have to pick up the pieces again? The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too bright, too public for this conversation. I could feel other people starting to notice our table, the raised voices carrying further than we intended. Maybe I should go, I said quietly. Yes, Chloe said immediately. Maybe you should. No, Sophia said firmly, looking at her daughter. Chloe, you're being incredibly rude to someone I care about, someone you barely know, someone who makes me happy, someone who treats me like I'm interesting and vital and worth knowing, someone who doesn't think my life is over because I'm past 50. The hurt in Chloe's eyes was immediate and raw. Is that what you think? That I think your life is over? I think you want me to be safe more than you want me to be happy. Those aren't always the same thing. Mother and daughter stared at each other across the table. 22 years of love and protection and expectations crackling between them. I felt like an intruder in their family drama, but also like the catalyst that had finally brought years of unspoken concerns to the surface. I just don't want you to get hurt, Chloe said finally, her voice small. I know, Sophia said gently, but I'm going to make my own choices about what risks are worth taking. Chloe looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing me as a person rather than a problem for the first time all evening. Do you love her? She asked. The question hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't used that word yet, Sophia. And the first we danced around it, implied it, felt it humming in the space between us, never said it out loud. Looking at Chloe's expectant face, then at Sophia's terrified one, I realized there was only one honest answer I could give. Yes, I said I do. The word hung in the air between us like a confession. Love, I'd said it. Out loud in front of Sophia's daughter in a restaurant full of strangers. There was no taking it back now. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. But I couldn't tell if they were happy tears or terrified ones. Chloe sat back in her chair, looking like I'd just solved a puzzle she'd been working on all evening. Well, Chloe said finally, that's ... honest. Chloe, Sophia started, but her daughter held up a hand. Oh, Mom, let me think for a minute. She looked at me with new assessment. You love her, okay? Do you love her enough to deal with the fact that everyone is going to have opinions about this? Do you love her enough to handle people assuming you're her son when you're out together? Do you love her enough to stick around when the novelty wears off and this becomes real life? Each question felt like a test, but they were fair questions. Questions I'd been avoiding asking myself. Yes, said simply. To all of it. What about kids? Do you want children? I could see Sophia tense, waiting for my answer. We'd skirted around this topic before, both of us afraid to have the conversation that might end everything. I thought I did, I said slowly. But I've realized that what I actually want is a life with someone I love. If that includes kids, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. That's a very convenient answer, Chloe said skeptically. It's an honest answer. 6 months ago I would have said kids were non-negotiable, but 6 months ago I hadn't met your mother. Sophia reached for my hand under the table. Daniel, ... No, I need to say this. I looked at Chloe directly. Hey. No, this looks crazy from the outside. I know the age difference is significant. I know people are going to judge us, And I know there are practical complications we haven't figured out yet. But your mother makes me want to be braver than I've ever been. She makes me feel like the person I could become if I stopped being. Afraid of taking chances? And what does she get out of it? Chloe asked. Besides someone young and eager to please? Chloe. Sophia's voice was sharp with hurt. It's okay, I said. We're going to seize her as she is now, not as she used to be. Someone who's excited about what comes next instead of nostalgic for what already happened. Someone who thinks she's just getting started instead of winding down. Chloe was quiet for a long moment, studying both of us. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than it had been all evening. You really believe that? That she's just getting started? I know she is. Your mother is the most vibrant, intelligent, fearless person I've ever met. Being retired doesn't make her less of any of those things. I worry about her, Chloe said quietly. After the divorce, she was so lost. I've never seen her like that before. She'd always been the one with all the answers. And suddenly, she didn't know what she wanted or who she was. And now? Sophia asked gently. Now you seem like yourself again. But what if? Chloe's voice cracked slightly. What if this doesn't work out? What if you get hurt worse than before? Sophia leaned forward, taking her daughter's hand. Honey, there are no guarantees in life. But I can't protect myself from getting hurt by refusing to feel anything. I spent the last 5 years of my marriage doing that, and it was the loneliest time of my life. I just want you to be careful. I am being careful. I'm being careful about what matters. I'm being careful not to let fear make my decisions for me. Chloe looked between us again, and I could see her internal struggle. The protective daughter warring with the young woman who understood what it meant to follow your heart. This is really weird for me, she said finally. Dating someone my age, I know, Sophia said. It's weird for me to sometimes, but you're happy? I'm happy. Chloe turned to me. And you're not going to hurt her? Not intentionally. But I can't promise I won't make mistakes. At least you're honest about it. She sighed, looking suddenly older than her 22 years. I guess I can't protect you from everything, Mom, even when I want to. I don't need protecting from Daniel, Sophia said softly. But I need you to trust that I can make good decisions about my own life. Okay, Chloe said, and the single word felt like a door opening. Okay, but I have conditions. What conditions? I asked. You hurt her, and I will end you. I don't care how nice you seem. Couldn't help but smile. That seems fair. And I want to get to know you properly. Not as Mom's neighbor, but as her. Whatever you are, boyfriend, Sophia said firmly. He's my boyfriend. The simple declaration felt like a victory. 3 months later, I was helping Sophia hang a new painting in her living room when she said something that made me drop the hammer on my foot. I've been thinking about what you said that first night. About moving in together. I looked at her, trying to read her expression, and I think you might have been onto something, even if you were joking. I wasn't joking, I said, rubbing my bruised toe. I mean, I thought I was, but I wasn't. She laughed. That same sound that had first caught my attention at the potluck. Well, my lease is up in 2 months. Your place has better natural light for my writing. Are you asking me to move in? With you? Or asking if you can move in with me? I'm asking if you want to try building something together. Really together this time?
Right.
I set down the painting and looked around her apartment. In the months since we'd been officially together, it had become as familiar to me as my own place. Maybe more familiar, since I spent most of my free time here anyway. What about Chloe? I asked. Chloe thinks we're crazy, but she also thinks we're happy. She's decided that happy crazy is better than safe and miserable. Chloe had indeed come around, though it had taken time. She'd started texting me directly. About a month after the disaster dinner, usually to complain about her organic chemistry class or to ask my opinion on some environmental campaign she was working on. It felt like being accepted into a very exclusive club. And your ex-husband? Richard can have opinions about my choices when he starts making better ones himself. His girlfriend is 28. Fair point. I pulled her closer. What about Emma? She still thinks you're corrupting me. Emma will adjust, and if she doesn't, that's her loss. I'd learned that Sophia was right about most things, especially things involving family dynamics and the art of not caring what other people thought. It had taken practice, but I was getting better at it. "So what are you saying exactly?" I asked. "I'm saying that 6 months ago you made a joke about moving in with me if I were 45. I told you I was 54, and you said it didn't change things. It didn't. Good, because I'm still 54, you're still 35. And people are still going to have opinions about us. But I'd rather deal with all of that together than apart." I kissed her, tasting coffee and the faint sweetness of the pastry we'd shared for breakfast. "Is this your way of proposing we cohabitate?" "This is my way of saying I love you and I want to see what happens next." "I love you too," I said. "I want to see what happens next too, even though it's going to be complicated, especially because it's going to be complicated." She smiled, the expression that had become my favorite thing in the world. "You know what Chloe said when I told her we were thinking about living together?" "What?" She said, "Mom, you're 54, not dead. Figure it out, smart kid." She gets it. From me. We finished hanging the painting, a watercolor of the Portland skyline that Sophia had bought from a local artist, and stepped back to admire our work. It looked good in the space, like it belonged there. "You know what's funny?" Sophia said, leaning against me. "I spent 30 years being practical about everything. Making lists, weighing pros and cons, choosing the safe option every time. The one time I decide to throw caution to the wind and follow my instincts. What? It turns out my instincts were right. I thought about that first night, about the joke that wasn't really a joke, about the courage it had taken for both of us to admit we wanted something that didn't make sense on paper. "Maybe we should get married," I said, only half joking. "Let's try living together first," she said, laughing. "But ask me again in a year? Is that a promise?" "That's a maybe." And for someone who spent most of his life avoiding maybes, that should sound pretty good. She was right. Maybe it was perfect. Maybe was all the possibility in the world wrapped up in one small word. Outside, Portland continued its daily rhythm. People went to work, couples fell in love, families grew and changed and figured things out as they went along. But inside, Sophia's apartment, our apartment. Now, everything felt exactly as it should be. Sometimes the best things really do happen when you least expect them. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, they happen because you're brave enough to make a joke that isn't really a joke at all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.